This is Chapter 5, Lesson 7, Graph on the Coordinate Plane. All right, so when I'm graphing ordered pairs, okay, to graph an ordered pair, I draw a dot at the point that corresponds to the coordinate. So, for example, if I'm graphing 4, 5, my x value is 4 and my y value is 5. So I go over 4, up 5, and make a point. -3, 1, I go over -3, up 1, make a point. -5, -5, over -5, down 5, make a point. 6, -2, I go over 6, down 2, I make a point. I can also graph reflections on the coordinate plane. So you can graph points that are reflected across the x and y axes. Remember that points reflected across the x-axis will have the same x coordinates and their y coordinates will be opposites. And points reflected across the y-axis will have the same y coordinates and their x coordinates will be opposite. Okay, so here's an example. So x and y. So if x is 0, it means it doesn't move. If it's positive, you move to the right. If it's negative, you move to the left. And for y, if it's 0, it doesn't move. If it's positive, you move up. And if it's negative, you move down. Okay, so here's a try it out problem. Okay, there's a picture hidden in this grid. Connect the points with lines to reveal it. So I want you to go ahead, plot all the points listed below. Okay, I'll do the first one with you, and then you're going to be on your own. So this says line 1, so you're going to connect these 3 points to each other, and then you're going to stop and take a break, and then you're going to do line 2, connect those points. Then line 3, you connect those points, and so on and so forth, okay? So I'll do line 1 first. So I have 9, 11. So I go over 9, up 11, make a point. Then I go over 6, up 12, make a point, and then I connect those two. Okay, so it's this one and this one. Okay, and then I have 5, 13. There. I connect those. Okay. Now the next set, you won't connect from 5, 13. All right. So once you're done, so go ahead, pause the video. Once you're done, we will look at the picture together. So once you're done, you've connected the dots appropriately. This is what your picture should look like. Okay. All right, so when we're graphing on the coordinate plane, the reflection across the x-axis, the x value stays the same and the y values change sign. Okay. So x values stay the same, y values change sign. Reflection across the y-axis, the y values stay the same, and the x values change signs. So, for example, I graph A, 2, -4, and then graph its reflection across the x-axis. Okay, so 2, -4 is right here. Because I'm going across the x-axis, the x value stays the same, so it's 2, and my y value changes. So -4 becomes 4, and I graph that point, so it's right there. Okay, and it's often written as A with this little tiny apostrophe, and it's called A prime. Okay. My second example says graph B, negative 1.53. Then graph its reflection across the y-axis. So negative 1.53 is right here. Okay. When I'm graphing across the y-axis, my y-coordinate stays the same. So it stays a 3. And my x-coordinate is my opposite. So the opposite of negative 1.5 is 1.5. When I graph that, I get b prime as 1.5, comma 3. All right, so here's a couple more try it problems. Go ahead, pause the video, try them out, and when you're done, we will go over the answers together. Okay, now that you've had a chance to try out the try it problems, let's go over the answers together. So, letter A says graph the point A across the x-axis and then state the coordinate point. So, here's my graph. I'm looking for letter A. Letter A is right here. So letter A's coordinate point is 6, 5. Okay, and I'm graphing across the x-axis, which means my x stays the same and my y changes. So my point is going to be 6, negative 5. So I'm going to go over 6, down to negative 5, make a point, and that's going to be A prime. Okay. And then that's my coordinate point for letter A. Letter B says graph the point C across the y-axis and then state the coordinate point. So C is right there. This coordinate point is 2, 1. Went over 2, up 1. Graphing across the y-axis, so my x value changes. So my x value becomes negative 2. My y stays the same at 1. So a negative 2, up 1. That's going to be C prime. And then, of course, there's my coordinate point. Letter C says graph the point F across the x-axis and then state the coordinate plane. Okay. So F is right there. F is at negative 3, negative 2. Okay. I'm graphing across the x-axis, which means my x stays the same and my y changes. So that means my x stays the same. My y changes from negative 2 to positive 2. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that point on the number line. So that's negative 3, positive 2, and that's F prime. Letter D, graph the point E across the y-axis, and then state the coordinate point. So D is right there. Its point is negative 4, 3. We're going across the y-axis, which means my x is opposite, my y stays the same. So that means it's 4, 3, which is D prime. Letter E, graph the point B across the x-axis. So here's point B. Point B is 4, 6, going across the x. So that means x stays the same, y changes. So 4, negative 6. Come down here, 4. That's B prime. Okay, there's my coordinate point. F, graph the point H across the y-axis, then state the coordinate point. So here's H, which is 4, -4. I'm going across the y-axis, so my y stays the same, my x changes. So that's -4. So if opposite of 4 is -4, -4, -4. So -4, -4 is right there. That's H prime. And again, that's my coordinate point. G, graph the point D across the x-axis, then state the coordinate point. Okay, so there's letter D, -4, 3. I'm going across the x-axis, so my x value stays the same. My y value changes. So I get -4, -3. So that's D prime. Okay. There's my point. Letter H, graph the point G across the y-axis. So there's G. G is 0, -4. Going across the y-axis. So my x value is opposite. Well, the opposite of 0 is 0. And the y value stays the same. So it's going to be the same point. So 0, -4. Okay. Letter I says graph the point I, -2, 3, and then reflect that point across the x-axis. What is the new coordinate point? So graph the point I, -2, 3, so there's I. Okay. And I want to graph it across the x-axis. So I want to do the opposite. It's going to be right here, so that's I prime. Okay, so because we graphed across the x value doesn't change, so that's -2. My y value changes, -3. And that is the end of lesson 7.